Hey, everyone. I never thought I'd be the type to spill my guts on the internet, but here I am. There's a lesson in what I'm about to tell you, and maybe, just maybe, it'll save some of you from making the same mistakes I did. This isn't some fiction I've cooked up to entertain you. It's my life, my reality, and it's ugly as hell. But if sharing it keeps even one person from being as blind and clueless as I was, it's worth it. Let's start with the greeting, though. Hi, I'm the guy who got his life turned upside down because of a stupid joke. Yeah, you heard that right. A fucking joke revealed that my wife, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, was screwing around behind my back. But before I dive into the heart of that shitstorm, let me introduce myself properly, give you some context. You'll need it to understand just how badly I got played. I'm in my early 40s now, a brunette with a couple of grays creeping in. Thanks, life. I'm not a model or anything, but I'm fit, take care of myself. I've got a job that pays well enough, project manager for a mid-sized firm. We're not swimming in cash, but we've never had to worry about bills either. I always thought I was doing okay, providing for my family, keeping the ship steady. But man, I had no clue what was brewing underneath the surface. Now let's talk about her, Emma. We met about 13 years ago, and when I first saw her, I was floored. She's blonde, tall, with these sharp, striking features. Emma is the kind of woman who turns heads when she walks into a room, and trust me, I wasn't immune to that. I fell hard. I thought I hit the jackpot. She had this magnetic energy, always wanting more out of life, always striving for something bigger and better. I liked that about her at first. She pushed me, made me feel like we were building something together. But as the years went on, it became more obvious that bigger and better didn't include us. It was all about her. More attention, more compliments, more things. Expensive things, too. She loved designer bags, new phones, jewelry. I'd get her some of it when I could, but the truth is, I could never really keep up with her appetite. Emma didn't work for the first few years of our marriage. She stayed at home with our son while I was out busting my ass to make ends meet. But when he started school, she got a job at some high-end gym as a personal trainer. Seemed harmless enough, right? I was just glad she had something to do other than spending money and complaining that I didn't have enough time for her. Now about her son. He's 8 now. And let me just say, I love that kid more than anything in this world. He's got red hair, which is the punchline to the joke that kicked off this whole mess. See, I'm a brunette, Emma's blonde, and our son? He's got this fiery red hair that doesn't match either of us. Sure, I know how genetics work and all that, but it's become a running joke between us. I make cracks about him being the neighbor's kid, dumb stuff like that. Hey, maybe the mailman's got some explaining to do, I'd say, and Emma would usually laugh or roll her eyes. But this one time at dinner, I dropped the usual line. Maybe I should go have a talk with the neighbor about our redhead, I said, half laughing as I shoveled food into my mouth. It was supposed to be one of those harmless, tired jokes, the kind that lands flat because you've said it a million times. Only this time, Emma's reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't laugh or roll her eyes. No, she froze. Just for a second. But it was there, a flash of something. Her smile dropped for a millisecond before she forced it back up. I swear, it was like someone had hit the pause button on her face. I don't know why, but that look got stuck in my head. It was like I had hit a nerve, but I wasn't sure how or why. I tried to shake it off, but over the next few days, I started noticing more little things. And when I say little, I mean tiny. Things you wouldn't normally even register if you weren't already suspicious. Like how her phone was suddenly glued to her side all the time. Sure, we all have our phones on us, but Emma used to leave hers lying around without a second thought. Now, it was always in her hand, her pocket, or face down on the table. And when it buzzed, she'd grab it like it was a ticking time bomb. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. Work was stressing me out, and I hadn't been home as much as I should have been. Late nights, early mornings, I was busting my ass to keep everything afloat. Emma had always complained about how much I worked, but in my mind, I was doing it for us. For her, and our son. I figured the distance between us was just because of my job. But looking back, maybe I should have seen the signs sooner. And then there were the girls' nights. They weren't new. Emma's always had a circle of friends she'd go out with now and then, but they were happening more often. And she'd come home later and later, sometimes a little too drunk for just a casual night out with the girls. I'd ask her how it was, and she'd shrug it off like it was nothing. Just the usual, she'd say, maybe tossing a name or two of people I didn't know. I didn't push it. Why would I? She was an adult, and I trusted her. Or at least I thought I did. See, here's the thing about trust. Once you get even the slightest reason to doubt it, you start questioning everything. You start playing detective in your own head. I'd lay in bed at night, thinking about that damn look on her face when I made the joke about our son's red hair. Was there something more to it? Was she hiding something? Or was I just being a jealous, insecure asshole? Now, you might be wondering about my friends Tom, Bob, and Rick. We've known each other for years since college, and they've always had my back. Every couple of weeks, we'd take off for a few days, just to get away from the grind. We'd go fishing, hiking, sometimes even just rent a cabin in the middle of nowhere. It was our time to decompress, do some manly shit, and forget about the rest of the world for a while. Emma hated those trips. Every single time I'd pack my bag, she'd throw me this look like I was abandoning her. "You're going off with your buddies again?" she'd say. "What about me? What about your family?" And maybe she had a point. Maybe I was selfish for wanting to escape now and then. But those trips kept me sane. They were my outlet, my way of blowing off steam, so I didn't lose my mind with all the pressure at work and at home. Besides, it's not like I was disappearing every weekend, just every couple of weeks. I thought it was harmless. Except while I was off with the guys, she was back home doing, well, who knows what at the time. I didn't realize it then, but she wasn't exactly sitting around waiting for me. Now, I've always had a messed up sense of humor. It's gotten me into trouble more than once, but it's also saved my ass in some pretty tense situations. Little did I know, it was about to be the catalyst for unraveling my entire marriage. So, after that little dinner table moment, where Emma froze after my dumb joke, I started getting this itch in the back of my mind. It was like a splinter I couldn't shake. I didn't know if I was just being paranoid or if something was actually wrong, but it got me thinking about relationships, cheating, and all that shit that never used to bother me. One night, I'm scrolling through YouTube, trying to unwind after a long day at work. That's when I stumbled on this video. Some guy pranking his wife by pretending he was cheating on her. The guy just casually drops a fake confession and records her reaction, which, as you can imagine, was pretty over the top. She freaked out, started screaming, throwing stuff. The whole thing was supposed to be a joke, a way to get a rise out of her. And by the end, they're both laughing it off. For some reason, I couldn't stop watching it. It was dumb, but it stuck with me. Now, here's where my own brand of stupid comes in. I started thinking, what if I did the same thing with Emma? She's always been jealous, not of my friends, but of this imaginary harem of women she thinks I'm hooking up with whenever I'm out with the guys. I mean, every time I come back from one of those trips with Tom, Bob, and Rick, she'd start up with the same accusations. Where'd you really go? Who were you really with? It was exhausting, to be honest. I'd try to reassure her, tell her it was just the guys, but she never seemed to believe me. The thing is, I never gave her a reason to be suspicious. I've never been the cheating type, but she was convinced that every time I wasn't glued to her side, I was off climbing into bed with some random woman. So, in my slightly twisted head, I figured, why not prank her like the guy in the video? Let her feel what it's like when the shoe's on the other foot. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. One night, after a few drinks at the bar with Tom and Bob, I came home feeling a little tipsy, but still in control. Emma was already in her usual mood, throwing passive-aggressive comments about how I was probably out with other women again. Normally, I just brush it off or argue with her, but this time, with the booze buzzing in my veins and that stupid YouTube video fresh in my mind, I decided to go through with it. I was going to pull off the best fake confession she'd ever heard. I quietly set my phone up on the counter, making sure it was angled just right so it could catch everything, then turned to her, pretending to be all serious. I put on my best guilty face, like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I had to sell it, make it believable. Emma, I said, sighing dramatically, I need to tell you something. I've been cheating on you. I'll be honest, I was pretty damn proud of myself. I sounded convincing, like a real actor pulling off some Oscar-worthy performance. I thought she'd freak out, maybe throw some dishes or start screaming like the wife in the video. But no, she didn't do any of that. She just stood there, staring at me with this look I couldn't quite place. I remember thinking, what the hell is going on? Then she hit me with it. Well, she said, folding her arms, I've been cheating on you too. At first I laughed. I mean, come on. We were in the middle of a prank, right? So I figured she was playing along, trying to one-up me. I even made some snide comment like, oh yeah? With who? Bob? Tom? The words came out of my mouth as a joke, but her expression didn't change. She just looked at me, dead serious. Yes, she said. With both of them. That's when the room started spinning, and it wasn't just the alcohol. My laugh died in my throat. Wait, what? I asked, feeling like I just stepped into a nightmare. You're not serious, are you? She didn't even blink. I'm serious. I've been fucking both of them. For a moment, I thought I was still drunk, that maybe I misheard her. But no, the cold, hard truth was sinking in. I didn't know what to say, what to do. My heart was pounding in my chest. My head felt like it was going to explode. I just sat there, staring at her, waiting for her to say it was all a joke, that she was messing with me, just like I'd been trying to mess with her. But the punchline never came. I don't remember much after that. The conversation blurred into shouting, accusations, and more words that I'll probably never fully recall. The only thing I do remember is stumbling out of the house at some point, sitting on the doorstep, clutching my head in my hands, feeling like my entire world had just collapsed. Because it had. That stupid prank, that little game I thought would be funny, had backfired in the worst way possible. It wasn't a joke anymore. This was my life, and everything I thought I knew about it was crumbling around me. Filing for divorce was the easy part. It was cold, clinical, and I'll admit, satisfying in a way, knowing I'd finally cut the cord with Emma. But after the paperwork was submitted, the questions started gnawing at me. It wasn't enough to just walk away. I needed something more, closure, maybe, or some twisted sense of justice. And I knew exactly where to start, Tom. Emma's betrayal hurt, no question. But Tom? That was a different kind of pain. We'd been friends for over a decade, ever since college. He wasn't just some guy I hung out with. He was someone I trusted, someone who'd been there for the big moments in my life. My wedding, the birth of my son, the times I thought we were solid. And now, I knew he'd been screwing my wife behind my back. The more I thought about it, the more it consumed me. I couldn't just let it go. I wasn't the kind of guy who'd sit back and take it. I wanted retribution, plain and simple. Rick was the first person I turned to when I decided to take action. Out of our group of friends, he was always the one with the calm head, the guy who could think things through when the rest of us were just reacting. He hadn't been involved in the mess with Emma, and that alone made him someone I could rely on. After a long night of drinking and venting, I told Rick everything about Emma, Tom, Bob, the prank gone wrong, all of it. Rick was furious on my behalf. He didn't try to talk me out of it when I told him I needed to get even with Tom. Instead, he asked, "What do you want to do?" That's when the plan started to take shape. Tom had a lot to lose, more than just his friendship with me. He had a good job, a wife, and 2 kids. That's right, he had a family too. He was living this picture-perfect life on the surface, all while screwing around with my wife behind the scenes. I wasn't just going to ruin his friendship. I was going to destroy the image he'd built, the one he pretended was so wholesome and solid. I was going to show him what betrayal really felt like. The first part of the plan was simple: gather evidence. Emma had deleted most of her messages, but Rick had a buddy who was a tech genius. He managed to recover some of the deleted texts from her phone. And let me tell you, what we found was more than enough. Explicit texts, photos, plans for meetups. Tom wasn't just some casual fling for Emma. They'd been going at it for months, if not longer. Seeing it all in black and white was like pouring salt on a wound, but it also fueled the fire inside me. With the evidence in hand, I needed to figure out the best way to ruin Tom. It wasn't just about exposing the affair. It was about hitting him where it hurt the most, his reputation, his family. That's where Rick came in. He knew Tom's wife well, had been friends with her through various gatherings and events. She was a nice woman, didn't deserve to be in the dark about who she was married to. But we had to be careful. This couldn't be some emotional outburst that backfired. We needed to be smart, calculated. Rick and I arranged a casual get-together, something Tom's wife wouldn't suspect. It was a weekend barbecue, nothing fancy, just the kind of thing our group did from time to time. Tom and his family came, smiling, laughing, completely unaware of what was coming. I watched them, and every laugh, every look of love his wife gave him, made my blood boil. I wanted to storm over and break his nose right there, but I kept it cool. I had a bigger plan. After a few drinks, Rick and I managed to slip away with Tom's wife. Let's call her Katie, for a private chat. We were subtle, didn't want to cause a scene. I could see the confusion in her eyes when we asked to talk to her alone, but she came along without questioning it too much. Once we were out of earshot, I pulled out my phone and showed her the texts, the photos, everything. At first, she didn't believe it. She stared at the screen, her face pale, her eyes blinking as if she was trying to process what she was seeing. "This can't be real," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Tom would never." But it was real. And Rick, bless him, was there to back me up, confirming everything, even offering to let her talk to his tech friend if she needed proof of how we got the messages. We gave her space to let it sink in, but the devastation was clear. She was a good person, someone who didn't deserve this any more than I did. But I needed her to see the truth. I needed her to know the kind of man she was married to. Katie didn't cry or scream. She was stronger than I thought she'd be. She just stood there, staring at the ground for what felt like an eternity. Then she said, "What do we do now?" That's when I told her the rest of the plan. We weren't just going to confront Tom. No, that was too easy. I wanted him to feel trapped, cornered. Katie agreed to play along, and we set the trap for the following weekend. Another gathering, but this time, it was at Tom's place. When the day came, I could barely keep myself together. Tom had no idea what was coming, and seeing him act all buddy-buddy with me made my skin crawl. We let the day roll on like normal until, finally, the moment arrived. Katie took him aside, just like Rick and I had done with her, and confronted him. The whole neighborhood could probably hear their argument. Tom tried to deny it at first, but when she showed him the evidence, there was no escaping it. And then I stepped in. I walked into the room just as Katie threw the final bomb. "Jack showed me everything," she said, her voice cold as ice. Tom turned to look at me, his face pale, his mouth hanging open. I could see the panic in his eyes, the realization that his entire life was crashing down around him. That look, that was what I had been waiting for. The betrayal in his eyes mirrored my own. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt a sliver of satisfaction. I didn't say much. There was no need. The damage was done. I just stood there, letting him see the cold fury on my face, knowing that his world was falling apart because of what he'd done. And I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Tom had been easy in the end. His family, his reputation, that was his Achilles heel. But Bob? Bob was a different story. The guy didn't have a family, didn't have much of a personal life, really. He lived for his career, always talking about his investments, his side hustles, and the next big score. Money was his weakness. If there was anything Bob cared about more than himself, it was his bank account. That's where I knew I could hurt him the most. After what happened with Tom, I didn't waste any time moving on to Bob. The anger that had been simmering for months was now a full-blown fire, and I was done holding back. It was personal, but it had to be smart. I couldn't just confront Bob like I did with Tom. It wouldn't have the same effect. No, Bob needed something different, something that would cut him deep, but leave no trace back to me. That's when I came up with the idea: financial fraud. Bob had always been boastful about his latest investments, always showing off the new ways he was making money, whether it was stocks, crypto, or some shady real estate deals. He loved feeling like the smartest guy in the room, like he was always one step ahead. But here's the thing: people like Bob get cocky. They think they're untouchable, that nobody can outsmart them. I was about to prove him wrong. The first step was to get Rick involved again. He had already helped me with Tom, but this time I needed his tech skills more than anything else. Bob was careful with his money, but Rick knew how to dig into the digital side of things. I laid out the plan for Rick over a few beers one night, and he didn't even hesitate. He was all in. We started by digging through Bob's public profiles, LinkedIn, Facebook, all the usual stuff. Bob liked to brag, so it wasn't hard to find out where he was investing and what he was excited about. He had a few properties he'd been bragging about, flipping them for profit. He mentioned some online investments as well, including a crypto exchange he was heavily into. It was a gold mine of information for us. The next step was finding a weak spot. Bob had been in some pretty questionable deals before. Things that skirted the line of legality, but nothing major enough to get him into real trouble. I figured if we could create something that looked legit enough, we could lure him in, and once he was in, he'd do most of the damage to himself. With Rick's help, we created a fake investment opportunity. We set up a slick-looking website for a fictional startup, one that promised big returns for early investors. It was the kind of thing Bob would jump at: new tech, high potential, lots of hype. We even populated the site with fake testimonials, links to dummy profiles on financial websites, and enough buzzwords to make it look legit. Then came the bake. I casually mentioned the opportunity to Bob during one of our conversations. We were having drinks after work, and he was going on about his latest crypto gains, so I slipped it into the conversation, acting like it was something I'd stumbled upon but wasn't sure about. Of course, Bob's eyes lit up. He couldn't resist the idea of getting in early on something hot, especially if I was hesitant. He thought he was smarter than me, that he could spot a good deal where I couldn't. Over the next few days, I played it cool, like I wasn't sure if I wanted to invest. Bob, though, he was hooked. He kept asking me about it, wanting to know more, pressing me for details. That's when I gave him the fake site and told him to check it out for himself. It didn't take long. A week later, Bob was in. He threw in a sizable chunk of cash, enough to make a dent in his portfolio if things went south, but not enough to bankrupt him. At least, not yet. The beauty of this plan was that once Bob was in, he did the rest of the work himself. He started pushing the investment to his contacts, trying to build his position, get others involved. That's how these scams work. The more people you get in, the bigger your slice of the pie. Bob didn't even realize he was stepping deeper into the trap. Rick and I waited until the timing was right. A few months in, after Bob had thrown even more money into the pot and was starting to see some returns, all fabricated, of course, we pulled the plug. The site went down, the company disappeared, and Bob's investment vanished into thin air. The fallout was immediate. Bob was livid, calling everyone he knew, trying to figure out what the hell had happened. He started pulling strings, contacting lawyers, but the thing was there was no trail. Everything had been scrubbed clean. The more he dug, the more he realized he'd been duped, and there was nothing he could do about it. And the worst part? He couldn't tell anyone. Bob had been scammed, and admitting that would mean admitting he wasn't as smart as he thought he was. I watched him unravel over the next few weeks. His confidence was shattered. He stopped talking about his investments, stopped bragging about his latest schemes. He was quieter, more reserved, like he'd taken a punch to the gut and was still trying to catch his breath. I didn't need to confront him, didn't need to rub it in his face. The loss itself was enough. Bob's whole identity was wrapped up in being the guy who always won, who always came out on top, and now he was just another sucker who got played. And the best part? He never knew it was me. As for Rick, he wiped his hands clean after it was all done. We didn't need to talk about it much afterward. We knew we'd done what needed to be done. I got my revenge on Tom and Bob, and the satisfaction of knowing they both paid for what they did. Was it enough? At the time, yeah, it felt like it, but in the back of my mind, I knew there was still one person left. Emma. After the fallout with Tom and Bob, you'd think the divorce process would have been the final nail in the coffin, the last chapter in a saga of betrayal and revenge. But no, that shit dragged on longer than I ever could have imagined. You see, Emma wasn't the kind of woman to walk away quietly. She wasn't just interested in splitting up and moving on. She wanted to bleed me dry in the process. At first, it seemed straightforward enough. We agreed to sell the house, split the assets, and go our separate ways. But when it came to the money, she started playing hardball. Specifically, she demanded an obscene amount of alimony, more than I expected, given the fact that she had a job now. But that wasn't even the worst of it. What really threw me was her demand for child support. She wanted me to pay for our son, and she didn't want just the standard amount. No, she wanted to live comfortably off that check for years to come. The kind of money she was asking for could have funded her next shopping spree lifestyle without her lifting a finger. And for a while, I was resigned to it. I mean, I loved the kid. I'd raised him, been his father, and I figured, fine, I'll take the hit for him, even if it means I'll be working double shifts for the next decade. But something kept gnawing at me, especially after that joke about the neighbor's kid. The thought had always been in the back of my head, lingering there, ever since Emma's face froze that night at the dinner table. And with everything that had come out about her cheating, I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I did what I never thought I'd do. I asked for a DNA test. It was the last resort, really. I didn't want to believe that the kid I'd raised for 8 years wasn't mine. But after everything Emma had put me through, I had to know for sure. Part of me felt like I was betraying him by even questioning it, but at the same time, I had to protect myself. I wasn't going to let Emma take everything from me, not if there was even the slightest chance that she was lying about this too. The results came in a week later. I remember sitting in my lawyer's office, staring at the envelope like it was a bomb about to go off. When I finally opened it, I felt like the world dropped out from under me. The test came back negative. The kid I'd been calling my son for nearly a decade wasn't mine. I just sat there, holding the paper, unable to move. There was anger, sure, but more than anything, I felt hollow, empty, like everything I'd built with Emma had been a lie from the very beginning. She'd lied about who she was, who I was, and even who my own son was. It felt like the final betrayal, the one that cut deeper than all the others combined. My lawyer? He was ready. He'd seen this kind of thing before, I guess, because the next steps came quickly. The DNA test blew Emma's whole case apart. Without that kid being mine, there was no way she could demand child support from me. She tried to fight it, of course, threw every excuse in the book at the judge, claiming I was still his father, that I'd raised him, that it didn't matter what the test said. But legally, it did matter. I wasn't on the hook for a single dime. The divorce process dragged on for months after that, but Emma had lost her leverage. We sold the house, and I took my half of the money. I wasn't interested in fighting for more. At that point, I just wanted out. I wanted to be done with her, with the lies, with everything that had turned my life into a nightmare. Once the house was gone, I packed up and moved to another city, far away from the madness that had consumed my life for too long. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I needed distance, both physically and mentally, from everything that had happened. New place, new job, new life. The memories of Emma, of the kid who wasn't mine, of the betrayals, they stayed with me, but I was determined not to let them define me anymore. I wasn't the same man who had made that dumb joke at the dinner table, oblivious to the storm brewing under my own roof. I was different now, maybe a little harder, a little colder, but also smarter. I'd been through the worst, and I'd come out the other side. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Update. It's been a while since I last posted, and a lot has changed since then. If you followed my story up to this point, you know how dark things got. How betrayal, divorce, and revenge became the center of my life. But now, I want to give you all an update because for the first time in what feels like forever, I'm finally in a place where I can breathe again. I've moved on. After the divorce and the house sale, I packed up and left that city. There was no point in staying. Too many memories, too much anger, and too many ghosts. I needed a fresh start, and moving to a new city gave me exactly that. It wasn't easy, starting over never is, but it was necessary. I found a new job, nothing fancy, but enough to pay the bills and keep me busy. And you know what? I've made new friends, built new routines, and started rebuilding my life, piece by piece. The past still lingers, of course. There are nights when it all comes flooding back, and I wonder how I could have been so blind for so long. But those moments don't define me anymore. They're just echoes of a life I've left behind. I've learned to focus on the future rather than the past, and it feels damn good. I don't have much contact with Emma anymore. There's nothing left to talk about. The kid, well, it's complicated. I'm not his father, not legally or biologically, but in my heart, part of me will always care about him. He was an innocent bystander in all of this, just as blindsided as I was. But for my own sanity, I had to create distance. Maybe someday, when he's older, we'll talk again. But for now, I'm focusing on rebuilding my own life. I want to take a moment to thank everyone who's been following my story, whether you've commented, messaged, or just read along quietly. Your support has meant more to me than you'll ever know. When you're going through hell, knowing you're not alone can make all the difference. So thank you. Really, it's been a long, brutal journey, but I'm standing on the other side of it now, and I wouldn't have made it without the encouragement from strangers. People like you who gave me hope when I had none. So, what's next for me? I'm not sure, but I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm staying focused on the present, trying to enjoy the little things again, things I'd forgotten I could enjoy. I'm healthier, mentally and physically, than I've been in years, and that's something I'm proud of. To anyone who's going through their own version of hell right now, just remember this. You can get through it. It may seem impossible, but I'm living proof that life goes on. You'll heal, you'll grow, and you'll find your peace again. It takes time, but it's worth it. Thanks again to everyone who's stuck by me through this roller coaster of a story. I wish you all success, happiness, and strength, no matter where life takes you. Take care of yourselves, and never stop fighting for the life you deserve.
I usually don't ask this early, but if you could like the video and subscribe, it would mean a lot. We're so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, and your support can really help get my content out there. Thanks. Marc Delacroix walked through the tree-lined streets of Paris, his mind wandering back to the life he had built with his wife, Camille. After 35 years of marriage, they were preparing for a grand celebration of their love. Their children, Claire and Mathieu, now grown and living abroad, were coming home for the occasion. The thought filled Marc with pride and nostalgia. Life hadn't always been easy, but he believed they had endured everything together. Marc was 60, still tall and commanding with his salt-and-pepper hair and sharp blue eyes. He had spent his life as a lawyer, building a respectable career that earned him both wealth and admiration. His name carried weight in Paris's legal circles, and he had provided well for his family. Camille, now 58, had been a school teacher for most of her life before retiring a few years earlier. She had always been his anchor, the warm, nurturing presence that balanced his driven, sometimes distant personality. Their home was in the heart of Paris, an elegant apartment overlooking the Seine. It was filled with memories, photos of vacations to the French Riviera, family gatherings, and mementos of a life they had carefully constructed together. The upcoming celebration would be another beautiful memory to add to their collection, or so Marc believed. As the evening of their anniversary approached, Marc decided to prepare a surprise for Camille. He wanted to relive the moments of their early love, so he ventured into their attic to search for the old photo albums and keepsakes from their early years. Camille was out running errands, and he thought this was the perfect time to reminisce. The attic was filled with boxes, mostly from their children's childhood and old family items. But one box caught his attention. It was tucked away in the corner, a small wooden chest that he didn't recall seeing before. Curious, he opened it. Inside were letters, yellowed with age, tied neatly with a ribbon. The handwriting was unmistakable, but it wasn't his. The letters were addressed to Camille. Mark's heart raced as he slowly began to read them. The words on the page revealed a secret he was never supposed to know. The letters were from Laurent, a man who had been a close friend of the family for years. Mark remembered Laurent well, tall, charming, a banker with a silver tongue who had often joined them for dinners and gatherings. He had always been courteous and respectful, but now, reading these letters, Mark realized there had been something more. The letters spanned several years, dating back to a time when Mark had been consumed with work, spending long hours at the office, traveling for business, and often leaving Camille alone at home. Laurent's words were filled with passion, longing, and intimacy, describing secret meetings, stolen kisses, and moments Mark had never imagined. It was clear that they had been having an affair. Mark felt his chest tighten as he read the lines. Every loving word between Camille and Laurent was a dagger to his heart. Laurent had written about the guilt they both felt, the fear of being caught, and the excitement of their hidden romance. Mark's mind swirled with confusion. How could Camille, the woman he had shared his life with, betray him in such a way? His hands shook as he dropped the letters back into the chest. For a moment, he stood there in the dim light of the attic, the weight of 35 years of trust and love crumbling around him. Everything he thought he knew about his marriage now seemed like a lie. He wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but a part of him didn't even know where to begin. Mark stumbled down the stairs, his thoughts racing. He couldn't believe this had been going on under his nose. How had he missed it? Was he really so blind to what had been happening in his own home? That evening, Camille returned, smiling as she walked through the door, her arms filled with groceries for the party. She kissed Mark on the cheek as she always did, unaware of the storm brewing inside him. He couldn't bring himself to look at her. Every touch felt like a betrayal. He excused himself, claiming he was feeling unwell. He needed time to process this, time to think about what to do next. Over the next few days, Mark lived in silence. He couldn't bear to confront Camille yet, and he couldn't confide in anyone, not even his children. He felt trapped in his own emotions, struggling to understand how to deal with this new reality. His mind replayed moments from their past, times when Camille had been distant, when she had seemed distracted. He wondered how many of those moments were connected to Laurent. Camille, oblivious to Mark's internal turmoil, continued planning their anniversary celebration with excitement. She spoke of renewing their vows, of how much she loved him after all these years. Mark listened in silence, his heart breaking with every word she said. One night, unable to sleep, Mark found himself staring out the window at the city lights of Paris. The memory of their wedding day played in his mind, a day filled with joy, hope, and promises. He had believed they would grow old together, but now he wasn't sure if that future existed. Finally, after days of torment, Mark knew he had to confront her. He couldn't live with the lie any longer. The night before their anniversary, Mark sat Camille down in their living room. His face was pale, his hands trembling as he brought the box of letters with him. Camille looked confused at first, but as he opened the chest and pulled out the letters, her expression changed. Her eyes widened in shock, then in shame. "Mark, please, let me explain," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Explain what?" Mark's voice was cold, filled with pain. "Explain how you could betray me like this? How long, Camille? How long were you with him?" Tears welled in Camille's eyes. She reached out to touch his hand, but he pulled away, unable to bear her touch. "It was years ago, Mark," she said softly, "when you were working all the time, when you were never home. I was lonely. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. Laurent, he was there. He made me feel seen. But it's over, Mark. It ended a long time ago." "Over?" Mark spat the word. "You expect me to believe that? You expect me to forget that you lied to me for years?" Camille's tears flowed freely now. "I never meant to hurt you. I was weak, and I made a terrible mistake. But I love you, Mark. I've always loved you. Please, you have to believe that." Mark stood up, pacing the room as he tried to make sense of her words. The anger and hurt inside him boiled over. "How can you say you love me after everything you've done? You shattered everything we built." For a long time they stood there in silence. Camille wept, and Mark stared at the woman he thought he knew, now feeling like a stranger to her. The pain was too much to bear. "I need time," Mark finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't do this right now." He left the room, leaving Camille sobbing on the couch. That night, he packed a bag and drove to their summer home in Provence. He needed to be alone, away from the city, away from the life that now felt like a lie. Chapter 5. The Retreat. In Provence, the air was crisp and the landscape serene, but Mark found no peace. He spent his days wandering through the fields and vineyards, trying to come to terms with what he had discovered. Every memory of his life with Camille was now tainted by betrayal. At night he would lie awake, his mind filled with questions. How could she have done this? Was it his fault? Had he been too focused on his career, too absent in their marriage? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that their marriage had not been perfect. There had been times when they had grown distant, when work had consumed him, and Camille had seemed lonely. But still, he had never imagined she would turn to someone else. A week passed, and Mark received messages from Camille every day. She begged for forgiveness, pleaded with him to come home. She told him she loved him, that she regretted everything, but Mark couldn't bring himself to reply. One evening, sitting on the porch of their summer home, Mark made a decision. He needed to speak to someone who could help him make sense of his emotions. He reached out to a therapist in the nearby village and scheduled an appointment. Mark's therapy sessions were difficult but necessary. For the first time, he was able to talk openly about his feelings of betrayal, anger, and confusion. The therapist helped him see that while Camille's actions had been wrong, the cracks in their marriage had been there for years. Mark had been distant, consumed by his work, and Camille had felt neglected. It didn't excuse her infidelity, but it helped Mark understand why it had happened. Over time, Mark began to heal. He realized that holding on to his anger would only continue to hurt him. He had a choice to make, whether to try to rebuild his marriage or to walk away and start anew. After several weeks, Mark returned to Paris. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew he needed to talk to Camille face to face. When Mark walked through the door of their apartment, Camille was waiting for him. She looked tired, her eyes red from crying. She stood up as he entered, but she didn't approach him. They stood there for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. "Mark," she began, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. I don't know how to make this right, but I need you to know that I love you. I've always loved you." Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I believe you, Camille, but I don't know if love is enough anymore. You broke something inside me, inside us." Tears welled in her eyes again, but she nodded. "I understand." They talked for hours that night, sharing their pain, their regrets, and their hopes for the future. In the end, Mark made the hardest decision of his life. He couldn't stay in the marriage. The betrayal had cut too deep, and he didn't believe they could ever truly heal. But he didn't leave with anger. Instead, he thanked Camille for the years they had shared, for the love they had once had, and for their children. They parted on peaceful terms, with an understanding that sometimes love, no matter how strong, isn't enough to overcome the damage that's been done. Mark moved to a smaller apartment in the city, focusing on rebuilding his life. He continued therapy, working through the pain of the past, and slowly, he began to find peace. He realized that while Camille had betrayed him, he could still find happiness in the years ahead. As for Camille, she stayed in their home, carrying the weight of her actions, but also finding a way to move forward. They remained in contact for the sake of their children, and over time, their relationship became one of mutual respect, if not love. Thank you for watching Shattered Vows, a tale of betrayal and redemption. This story reminds us that trust is the foundation of any relationship, and once broken, it's hard to rebuild. But in the end, it's about finding the strength within to move forward, no matter how painful the journey may be. If you enjoyed the story or have any thoughts, questions, or personal experiences you'd like to share, we'd love to hear them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this.
Subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab for more original and exclusive stories. Now let's begin this one. Ezra Blackwood's head felt like it was splitting in two. The harsh fluorescent light stabbed at his eyes as he struggled to focus on his surroundings. White walls, the antiseptic smell, a rhythmic beeping, hospital. But why? He tried to piece together his fragmented memories. There had been a business trip, a last-minute flight to Chicago, the Hyatt Regency. He'd gotten back early, wanting to surprise Vivian. The sharp click of heels on linoleum snapped him back to the present. Vivian, his wife of 10 years, stood in the doorway, perfectly put together as always in her Chanel suit. Her manicured nails fidgeted with the strap of her Hermes bag. "I'm sorry you caught me with my lover in that hotel room," she said, her voice lacking any real remorse. "He didn't mean to knock you out cold, I swear. Please don't press charges." Ezra stared at her, rage building inside him like magma in a volcano. 10 years of marriage, a decade of shared dreams, struggles, triumphs. All of it a lie. "I'll destroy you both without the law," he replied, his voice hoarse but filled with icy determination. Vivian's concerned facade crumbled, replaced by a smirk that made Ezra's blood boil. She chuckled, the sound grating on his nerves. "Oh, honey, you'll be paying me alimony for the rest of your miserable life." As she turned to leave, something caught Ezra's eye. An emerald pendant hung around her neck, glinting in the harsh hospital lighting. He didn't recognize it. It certainly wasn't a family heirloom he would have known. A gift from her lover, no doubt. Another betrayal to add to the growing list. Before he could demand answers, a nurse bustled into the room. "Mr. Blackwood, you have another visitor. Your sister, Lydia?" Ezra's brow furrowed. He hadn't spoken to Lydia in years. What the hell was she doing here? The nurse ushered in a woman who bore little resemblance to the carefree girl Ezra remembered. Lydia Blackwood, now 35, carried herself with the wary confidence of someone who had seen too much of the world's darkness. Her sharp eyes took in every detail of the room before settling on her brother. "Hello, Ezra," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "It's been a while." Ezra nodded, unsure how to respond. The last time they'd spoken had been at their father's funeral 10 years ago. James Blackwood's death in a car accident had shattered their family. Ezra had thrown himself into his legal career, determined to make his father proud. Lydia had chosen a different path. "I heard about what happened," Lydia continued, perching on the edge of a plastic chair. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," Ezra growled. "What are you doing here, Lydia? Last I heard, you were chasing conspiracy theories halfway around the world." Lydia's eyes flashed with irritation. "I'm an investigative journalist, Ezra. And those conspiracy theories have uncovered some very real, very dangerous truths. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. I've been investigating a series of corporate cover-ups. I think they're connected to Dad's death. Ezra scoffed. Dad died in a car accident, Lydia. It was tragic, but it wasn't some grand conspiracy. Was it? Lydia challenged. Have you ever looked into the circumstances? The brake failure, the convenient lack of witnesses. Ezra opened his mouth to argue, but Lydia pressed on. I've uncovered links to a company called Nexichem. They're at the center of this whole mess. Nexichem. The name sent a chill down Ezra's spine. It was one of his firm's biggest clients. He personally handled several of their environmental compliance cases. What do you know about Nexichem? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Lydia's eyes narrowed. More than I can safely share right now. But I think they're involved in something big, Ezra. Something deadly. Before Ezra could respond, he heard hushed voices outside his room. He recognized Vivian's voice, along with a man's he didn't know. The words Nexichem and silencing drifted through the partially open door. Lydia tensed, clearly having heard the same thing. We can't talk here, she whispered. It's not safe. As if on cue, a man appeared in the doorway. Felix Reeves, Ezra's longtime friend and a private investigator, surveyed the room with a practiced eye. Ready to blow this popsicle stand? Felix asked, his casual tone belying the concern in his eyes. I've got a car waiting. Ezra nodded, suddenly eager to be anywhere but here. As Felix helped him out of bed, Lydia gathered his belongings. We'll go to my place, she said quietly. We have a lot to discuss. Felix's car wound through the city streets, the tension in the vehicle palpable. Ezra's mind raced, trying to process everything that had happened. His perfect life had shattered in an instant, and now his estranged sister was talking about conspiracies and cover-ups. They pulled up to a nondescript apartment building. Lydia led them up 3 flights of stairs, constantly checking over her shoulder. She unlocked a heavy door and ushered them inside. The apartment was small but neat, filled with stacks of papers and multiple computer screens. A young woman with bright blue hair looked up from one of the computers, her eyes widening at the sight of the newcomers. Ezra, Felix, this is my roommate Zara Chun, Lydia said. Zara, this is my brother Ezra and his friend Felix. Zara nodded curtly, her gaze lingering on Ezra. The corporate lawyer, she said, her tone making it clear that wasn't a compliment. Ezra bristled. Environmental law. Actually, I specialize in helping companies comply with regulations and clean up contaminated sites. Something in Zara's expression shifted. Really? That's not what I expected. Before Ezra could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and saw it was Harold Winters, his law firm partner. With a sigh, he answered, Ezra, where the hell are you? Harold's voice was tense. Vivian's already filed for divorce. She's seeking a substantial settlement. Ezra's grip on the phone tightened. What? How is that even possible? It's been less than a day. I don't know, but her lawyers are moving fast. We need to talk strategy. Can you come in? I'll be there as soon as I can, Ezra said, his mind reeling. He hung up and turned to the others. I have to go to the office. Vivian's already filed for divorce. Lydia's eyes narrowed. That was fast. Too fast. Ezra, before you go, there's something you need to see. She pulled out a file and spread its contents on the coffee table. These are the results of my investigation into Nexichem. There's a pattern of environmental violations, suspicious accidents at their facilities, and, well, look at this. Ezra leaned in, his legal mind immediately spotting the irregularities in the documents. This can't be right. These violation reports, they're identical to the ones I filed, but the data's been altered. Zara spoke up, her earlier hostility replaced by professional interest. I've been helping Lydia dig into Nexichem's digital footprint. Their security is tight, but I've managed to find some discrepancies in their financial records. As if on cue, one of Zara's computers pinged. She rushed over, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Holy shit. Ezra, I think this is for you. She turned the screen, revealing an encrypted email addressed to Ezra. With shaking hands, he entered his password. The message opened, revealing partial financial records that hinted at massive bribes paid by Nexichem to various officials and law firms, including Ezra's own. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Ezra felt like the floor was dropping out from under him. Everything he thought he knew about his marriage, his career, even his father's death was suddenly in question. Felix was the first to break the silence. Well, folks, looks like we've got ourselves a good old-fashioned conspiracy. What's the play? Lydia looked at Ezra, her expression a mix of determination and uncertainty. That depends on you, big brother. Are you in? Ezra glanced around the room, at his estranged sister who had never given up searching for the truth, at the brilliant hacker who had put aside her prejudices to help, at his loyal friend ready to dive into danger. Then he thought of Vivian's betrayal, of the altered documents, of his father's suspicious death. He took a deep breath. I'm in. Let's take these bastards down. Zara grinned, cracking her knuckles as she turned back to her computer. Now we're talking. Let's see what else we can dig up on Nexichem. As the team began to formulate their plan, Ezra couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far bigger and more dangerous than any of them realized. But for the first time in years, he felt alive. The truth was out there, and he was going to find it, no matter the cost. Ezra Blackwood straightened his tie, his face a mask of professional detachment as he strode into the offices of Winters, Blackwood, and Associates. The familiar scent of leather and expensive cologne did nothing to calm the storm raging inside him. Every face he passed, every greeting he returned, it all felt like a lie now. He nodded to his secretary, Sarah, as he passed. Any messages? Mr. Winters wants to see you in his office as soon as possible, Sarah replied, her brow furrowed with concern. Is everything all right, Mr. Blackwood? There are rumors. Ezra forced a smile. Just a bit under the weather. Nothing to worry about. As soon as his office door closed behind him, Ezra's facade crumbled. He sank into his chair, his mind racing. How deep did this conspiracy go? How many of his colleagues were involved? He booted up his computer, heart pounding as he began to dig through the firm's files on Nexichem. What he found made his blood run cold. Report after report of environmental violations, all neatly covered up with falsified data and legal sleight of hand. And there, buried in a subfolder, was a document detailing a toxic waste spill in a low-income neighborhood. The cancer rates in the area had skyrocketed, but Nexichem had managed to dodge all responsibility. Ezra felt sick. He had built his career on protecting the environment, on holding corporations accountable. And all this time, he had been part of the problem. A commotion outside his office pulled him from his thoughts. He recognized that voice, Vivian. I don't care if he's busy. He's my husband, and I need to speak with him now. Ezra steeled himself as the door burst open. Vivian stormed in, her eyes blazing with a fury he had never seen before. You think you can just disappear and ignore my calls? She hissed. My lawyers are going to bury you, Ezra. Unless what? Ezra asked, his voice deceptively calm. Vivian's lips curled into a cruel smile. Unless you agree to my terms. No questions asked, no fights. You give me what I want, or I'll make sure everyone knows about your dirty little secrets. Ezra's mind raced. What secrets? He had always been faithful, always played by the rules. Then he saw it, the watch on Vivian's wrist. It was too large for her, clearly a man's watch, and he recognized it. It belonged to Harold Winters. Before he could process this new betrayal, his phone buzzed. A message from Harold. My office. Now. Ezra stood, straightening his suit. We're not done here, Vivian. Her laughter followed him out the door. Oh, we're just getting started, darling. Harold's office was a shrine to old money and power. The man himself sat behind a massive mahogany desk, His fingers steepled as he watched Ezra enter. "Sit down, Ezra," Harold said, his tone deceptively friendly. "We need to talk about Nexichem." Ezra's heart skipped a beat. He fought to keep his expression neutral as he took a seat. "What about them?" Harold's eyes narrowed. "I've heard rumors that you've been investigating our biggest client. I'm sure I don't need to remind you about client confidentiality." The threat was clear. Ezra felt a chill run down his spine. "Of course not," he replied smoothly. "I'm just doing my due diligence, making sure all our I's are dotted and T's are crossed." Harold nodded, but his eyes remained cold. "See that you do. Nexichem is very important to this firm. It would be a shame if anything were to jeopardize that relationship." As Ezra left Harold's office, his phone buzzed again. A message from Felix. "Got something you need to see. Meet me at the usual spot." An hour later, Ezra sat in a dimly lit bar, watching surveillance footage on Felix's laptop. His stomach churned as he saw Harold Vivian and a man he recognized as Marcus Thorne, Nexichem CEO, meeting at a secluded marina. "When was this taken?" Ezra asked, his voice hoarse. Felix's expression was grim. 2 days ago." "Ezra, I think your wife's affair, it wasn't just about sex. I think it was orchestrated to keep you in check." Ezra nodded, the pieces falling into place. His own firm, his own wife. They were all part of Nexichem's web of deceit, and he had been the fool at the center of it all. "We need to bring them down," Ezra said, his voice filled with cold determination. "All of them." Felix nodded, his eyes glinting with the thrill of the hunt. "Where do we start?" Zara's fingers flew across the keyboard, her face illuminated by the glow of multiple screens. Lydia paced behind her, while Ezra sat perfectly still, his lawyer's mind cataloging every detail. "Got it," Zara announced, her voice tight with excitement. "I've decrypted the anonymous email. You're not going to believe this." The screens filled with financial records, showing a complex web of transactions between Nexichem, Winters, Blackwood and Associates, and a dozen shell companies. "It's a massive money laundering operation," Lydia breathed, her journalist instincts on fire. "They're hiding millions in bribes and payoffs." Ezra's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Need to talk. It's about Nexichem. Meet me in the parking garage. Level B2. Mia." He recognized the name. Mia Rodriguez, a paralegal at the firm. Young, ambitious, and sharp as a tack. What did she know? "I have to go," Ezra said, standing abruptly. "Keep digging. We need everything you can find." The parking garage was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of oil and exhaust. Ezra's footsteps echoed as he made his way to level B2. A figure emerged from the shadows, Mia, her eyes wide with fear. "Mr. Blackwood," she whispered, glancing around nervously. I found something about Nexichem. I think they're dumping toxic waste illegally." Ezra's heart raced. "Tell me everything." Mia's words tumbled out in a rush. She had been organizing files when she stumbled across documents detailing Nexichem's illegal activities. For months, she had been quietly gathering evidence, terrified of what might happen if she came forward. "I want to do the right thing," Mia said, her voice shaking. "But I'm scared. These people, they're powerful. They're dangerous." Ezra placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're doing the right thing, Mia. We'll protect you. I promise." As they formulated a plan for Mia to act as a whistleblower, with Ezra as her legal representation, Lydia made another breakthrough. She uncovered old news articles suggesting that their father, James Blackwood, had been investigating Nexichem before his death. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture more horrifying than any of them had imagined. But as they prepared to go public with their evidence, a new complication arose. Vivian reached out to Ezra, her voice honey-sweet on the phone. "Darling, I've made a terrible mistake. Can we meet? I want to make things right." Ezra's instinct screamed that it was a trap, but he saw an opportunity. "Of course," he replied, his voice carefully neutral. Our usual place? As Vivian spun her tale of manipulation and regret, Ezra discreetly recorded every word. He didn't believe her for a second, but her confession might prove useful. Their celebration was short-lived, however. Zara discovered that their communications had been compromised. Nexachem's private security force was watching their every move. The net was closing in, but Ezra and his team were ready for a fight. The abandoned Nexachem research facility loomed before them, a hulking shadow against the night sky. Ezra's heart pounded as he and Felix approached, their footsteps muffled by the overgrown grass. Mia had vanished without a trace, just as they were preparing to go public with their evidence. Felix had traced her last known location to this facility, and now they were walking into what felt very much like a trap. "I don't like this," Felix muttered, his hand hovering near the gun concealed under his jacket. "It's too quiet." Ezra nodded. "We don't have a choice. Mia risked everything to help us. We can't abandon her now." They found a rusted side door, the lock easily picked by Felix's skilled hands. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the acrid smell of chemicals. Their flashlights revealed abandoned equipment, shattered glass, and ominous dark stains on the floor. As they delved deeper into the facility, they stumbled upon a room that made Ezra's blood run cold. It was a makeshift laboratory, filled with bubbling vats of noxious liquid and cages that had clearly once held test subjects. The implications were horrifying. "My God!" Felix whispered, snapping photos with his phone. "This is way bigger than we thought. They're not just dumping toxic waste. They're creating it." A noise from the hallway made them both freeze. Footsteps getting closer. They ducked behind a large piece of equipment, hearts racing as a group of men entered the room. At their head was Marcus Thorne, Nexachem CEO, his expensive suit incongruous in the decrepit lab. "Find them," Marcus snarled to his security team. "They can't be allowed to leave here alive." Ezra and Felix exchanged a look of panic. They were trapped, outgunned, and running out of options. But before they could move, another figure entered the room, Lydia. Ezra's heart stopped. What was his sister doing here? But as he watched, his confusion turned to horror. Lydia walked up to Marcus, her posture relaxed, familiar. "The basement is clear," she reported. "No sign of them." Marcus nodded. "Good work, Agent Blackwood. Your cover has been invaluable to us." Ezra felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Lydia, working for Nexachem? It couldn't be true. But as he watched his sister interact with the man responsible for so much suffering, doubt crept in. Had everything been a lie? The standoff that followed was tense, with Lydia clearly torn between her loyalty to her brother and her commitment to whatever mission she was on. Ezra's mind raced, trying to make sense of this betrayal. But there was no time for explanations. As Marcus's men closed in, violence erupted. In the chaos, Felix was hit, crying out in pain as a bullet tore through his shoulder. Ezra managed to fight his way to a locked door, behind which they found Mia, terrified but alive. As they fled the facility, alarms blaring and gunshots echoing behind them, Lydia appeared one last time. She pressed a USB drive into Ezra's hand, her eyes pleading. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'll explain everything, I promise. But you have to go. Now." Ezra hesitated, 1,000 questions on his lips. But with Felix bleeding and Mia shaking with fear, he knew they had no choice. They ran into the night, leaving Lydia behind to maintain her cover, whatever that truly meant. As they sped away in Felix's car, Ezra clutched the USB drive, his mind reeling. The evidence they had gathered, the risks they had taken, the betrayals they had suffered. It all paled in comparison to the realization that this conspiracy went deeper than any of them had imagined. And at the center of it all was his sister, a woman he thought he knew, now a stranger playing a game he didn't understand. As the city lights blurred past, Ezra made a silent vow. He would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Nexachem, Winters, Blackwood, and Associates, even Lydia herself, they would all face justice. The web of deceit was vast, but Ezra was done being a fly caught in its strands. It was time to become the spider. The safe house was a far cry from the luxury Ezra Blackwood was accustomed to. Peeling wallpaper, the musty smell of old books, and a pervasive dampness that seemed to seep into his bones. But right now, it was the safest place in the world. Ezra sat at a rickety table, his laptop open before him, surrounded by stacks of documents. Across from him, Mia Rodriguez pored over financial records, her brow furrowed in concentration. In the corner, Zara's fingers flew across her keyboard, the glow of multiple screens illuminating her face in the dim room. They had been here for days, maybe weeks. Time had become a blur. Felix's activist contacts had come through, providing them with a network of safe houses to move between. But the constant fear of discovery, the paranoia that each shadow held an enemy, was taking its toll. Ezra rubbed his eyes, trying to focus on the document before him. His mind kept drifting to Lydia, his sister, the undercover agent. The betrayal still stung, even as he tried to rationalize it. Was she really on their side? Or had everything been a lie? Holy shit. Zara's voice cut through the silence. You guys need to see this. Ezra and Mia crowded around Zara's workstation. On the screen, plans for a massive construction project unfolded. They're planning to dump toxic waste in the Oakwood Nature Reserve, Zara explained, her voice tight with anger. If this goes through, it'll contaminate the groundwater for the entire region. Ezra felt his stomach churn. Oakwood was one of the last unspoiled areas in the state, home to endangered species and a vital water source for surrounding communities. We can't let this happen, Mia said, her voice shaking with determination. We have to stop them. Ezra nodded, his mind already racing with legal strategies. We need more evidence. Concrete proof that links Nexichem to the dump site. As if on cue, Ezra's burner phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated for a moment before answering. Ezra, Vivian's voice uncharacteristically hesitant. We need to talk. I want to help. Ezra's grip on the phone tightened. Why should I believe you? Because I know things, Ezra. Things that could bring down Nexichem, Harold. All of them. Meet me, please. For old time's sake. Ezra's mind raced. It could be a trap, but if Vivian was telling the truth, her testimony could be the key to breaking the case wide open. I'll think about it, he said finally and hung up. Zara and Mia looked at him expectantly. Ezra sighed. That was Vivian. She says she wants to help. Mia's eyes widened. You can't seriously be considering trusting her. We don't have to trust her, Ezra replied, a plan forming in his mind. But we can use her. If she's genuine, great. If not, well, we'll be ready. As they began to formulate a plan, Ezra couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Nexichem's toxic dump could happen any day now. They needed to act fast. But first, he had a decision to make about Lydia. His sister was in deep, playing a dangerous game. Could he trust the information she was feeding them? Or was she leading them into a trap? Ezra stared at the USB drive Lydia had pressed into his hand during their escape from the Nexichem facility. He hadn't told the others about it yet. With a deep breath, he plugged it in. What he found made his blood run cold. Detailed plans of Nexichem's operations, financial records, emails implicating high-level government officials. And at the center of it all, a name that made Ezra's heart stop, James Blackwood. Their father hadn't just been investigating Nexichem before his death. He had uncovered a conspiracy that went far beyond corporate greed. This was about power, about control over the most basic human need, water. Ezra leaned back, his mind reeling. They weren't just fighting a corporation anymore. They were up against a system, a web of corruption that stretched from the boardroom to the highest levels of government. He looked at Mia and Zara, both still poring over documents, unaware of the bombshell Ezra had just uncovered. They had all risked everything to get this far. Now, it was time to take the biggest risk of all. Pack up, Ezra said, his voice filled with determination. We're going to meet Vivian, and then we're going to bring the whole damn system down. The Nexachem boardroom was a study in corporate opulence. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while the polished mahogany table reflected the concerned faces of the board members gathered around it. Marcus Thorne, CEO of Nexachem, stood at the head of the table, his usual confidence noticeably shaken. Ladies and gentlemen, I assure you that these allegations are completely unfounded. Nexachem has always operated within the bounds of the law. From her seat at the table, Lydia Blackwood fought to keep her expression neutral. Years of undercover work had honed her poker face, but even she was finding it difficult to maintain her composure. Everything was coming to a head, and she prayed that Ezra's plan would work. As if on cue, the doors burst open. Ezra strode in, Mia at his side, followed by a team of federal agents. The room erupted in chaos. Marcus Thorne. Ezra's voice cut through the commotion. You and your co-conspirators are under arrest for environmental crimes, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Marcus's face contorted with rage. This is absurd. You have no authority. Oh, but we do, Mia interrupted, her voice steady despite her nervousness. She nodded to Zara, who had slipped in unnoticed during the confusion. Suddenly, every screen in the room came to life. Financial records, emails, surveillance footage, all the evidence they had painstakingly gathered over the past weeks played out for all to see. At this very moment, Ezra continued, this evidence is being broadcast to every Nexachem employee, shareholder, and regulatory agency. The game is over, Marcus. Lydia stood, finally dropping her cover. And that's not all. We have proof that Nexachem was responsible for the death of James Blackwood, a man who threatened to expose your plan to monopolize water resources through deliberate contamination. The color drained from Marcus's face. He lunged for his laptop, likely containing even more incriminating evidence. But Ezra was faster. What followed was a desperate chase through the Nexachem headquarters. Ezra pursued Marcus through winding corridors and up staircases, their footsteps echoing in the suddenly empty building. They burst onto the roof. The city spread out before them. Marcus stood at the edge, the hard drive clutched in his hand, the wind whipping his usually immaculate suit. It's over, Marcus, Ezra called out, cautiously approaching. There's nowhere left to run. Marcus turned, a wild look in his eyes. You don't understand, Blackwood. This goes beyond Nexachem, beyond me. We were creating a better world. By poisoning people? By killing my father? Ezra's voice cracked with emotion. How is that a better world? Resources are running out, Marcus snarled. Water is the new oil. Whoever controls it, controls everything. Your father was too idealistic to see that. Just like you. Ezra took another step forward. It doesn't have to be this way, Marcus. Turn yourself in. Tell the truth. Maybe then we can actually build a better world. For a moment, it seemed like Marcus might consider it. Then, with a bitter laugh, he hurled the hard drive off the roof. Ezra lunged for it, but it was too late. The small device disappeared into the city below, taking with it the names of countless corrupt officials. As the authorities led Marcus away, Ezra stood at the edge of the roof, looking out over the city. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The congressional hearing room was packed. Journalists, activists, and curious citizens filled every available seat, while cameras broadcast the proceedings to millions around the world. Ezra adjusted his tie, acutely aware of the weight of the moment. Beside him, Lydia gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. Despite the years of separation and recent revelations, they were in this together now. Mr. Blackwood, the committee chairman began, please tell us in your own words what you uncovered about Nexachem and its collaborators. For the next several hours, Ezra and Lydia laid out the entire conspiracy, the environmental violations, the cover-ups, the bribes, and finally, the truth about their father's death. As they spoke, screens around the room displayed evidence, much of it provided by Harold Winters in exchange for a plea deal. In another part of the city, Vivian Blackwood was led away from her private jet in handcuffs, her attempt to flee the country thwarted by an anonymous tip. Back in the hearing room, Ezra concluded his testimony. Nexicam's crimes are not isolated incidents. They are symptoms of a deeper sickness in our society, where profit is prioritized over people, and the environment is seen as a resource to be exploited rather than protected. It's time for a change. The aftermath of the hearing was a whirlwind. Indictments were handed down, regulations were tightened, and a national conversation about corporate responsibility and environmental protection took center stage. Months passed. Ezra found himself standing before a group of eager law students, their faces a mix of idealism and uncertainty that reminded him of himself. Not so long ago. The law is a powerful tool, he told them, but it's only as good as the people wielding it. You have the power to shape the future, to fight for justice, to protect those who can't protect themselves. Use it wisely. As the students filed out, Ezra's phone buzzed with a message from Lydia. Her book, Exposing Corporate Environmental Crimes, was hitting shelves next week, another step in their ongoing fight. Later that evening, Ezra met with Felix and Zara at their new office. The sign on the door read Clearwater Tech, Innovative Solutions for a Cleaner Future. Felix, his arm still in a sling but his spirit unbroken, grinned as Ezra entered. Welcome to the revolution, counselor. Zara looked up from her computer, her eyes bright with excitement. We just finalized the plans for our first water purification plant. Want to see? As Ezra looked over the plans, he felt a sense of hope he hadn't experienced in years. They had a long way to go, but they were on the right path. His phone buzzed again. A message from Mia, now in her second year of law school, top of her class. She was interning at an environmental law firm over the summer and wanted Ezra's advice on a case. Ezra smiled as he typed his reply. The fight for justice was far from over, but they weren't in it alone anymore. A new generation was rising, armed with knowledge, passion, and the determination to make a difference. As he left the office that night, Ezra paused to look up at the stars, barely visible through the city's light pollution. Somewhere up there, he liked to think his father was watching, proud of what they had accomplished and what they continued to fight for. The web of deceit had been torn down, but the work of rebuilding, of creating a more just and sustainable world, was just beginning. And Ezra Blackwood was ready for the challenge. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My name is Jack Taylor, and this is my story. Being married to Mira was a whirlwind, equal parts thrilling, maddening, and heartbreaking. In our 2 years together, I never truly felt married. Sure, I felt the weight of commitment, but Mira? She seemed untethered by it. Her priorities revolved around her figure, her wardrobe, her green card, earning a master's degree, and making money. The one thing missing from her list was me. I was never more than a footnote in her grand plan. Mira is 5 feet 4 inches, with striking blonde hair, a tiny waist, flawless Middle Eastern Eurasian skin, green eyes, and a 36C frame. She radiates a raw sensuality that makes men revert to primal instincts. But for Mira, sex wasn't an expression of intimacy. It was a weapon, a tool for manipulating every man in her orbit. Do I miss her personality? Not at all. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss how she could set the bedroom on fire. She had an unbridled lust, a willingness to try nearly anything, and I was completely hooked. Yet, even in our most intimate moments, I never felt genuine affection or love from her. In hindsight, I can't recall her ever saying, "I love you." It simply wasn't part of her vocabulary or our so-called relationship. Looking back now, there wasn't a real relationship at all. We were just going through the motions, living in a cold, hollow facade. I had been stuck in an ice castle, too blind to see it. It took a hard wake-up call, a figurative slap to the face, to finally pull my head out of the fog. She never wanted slow, passionate lovemaking. She didn't want foreplay. She wanted it hard and raw. The animalistic sex was plentiful. I often longed for the emotional intimacy she denied me. Mira never gave me a hug or a cuddle. She used my body and I used hers. The difference being that I loved her. She never loved me. I was able to take care of her needs, but not a lot of her wants. I went into some serious debt trying. We ate out so much my oven was dusty. I'm a high school teacher. I make a decent living, but I'll never be rich. I did my best. There was no way I could hang with the country club set. It was not enough for her. The greedy bitch. When I met her 4 years ago, she was a nanny. I was immediately impressed with her beauty and intelligence. She was exotic and independent. I later discovered that what I thought was independence was really a manifestation of her self-centered manipulating personality. From the beginning, she was egotistical and selfish. I always saw better in her than actually existed. I felt like a moth that was irresistibly drawn to the flame that would kill him. Don't ask me why. I should have kicked her to the curb after the first week I met her. I guess I needed to see the good in her. Maybe I was thinking with the wrong head. I wish there had been a way for me to keep the lower half of her and get rid of rest of her. So, the obvious question is why I put up with her manipulating, callous, and deceitful ways for so long? Until recently, I never thought of myself as a chicken. Looking back, I guess I was. Somehow, I thought of my patience and tolerance as strength. I promised her father, in Turkey, that I would provide for and protect his daughter. It was important to me that I kept my word. I've always thought that he was a good and honorable man who had no idea who his daughter really is. I was raising twin sons from a previous disaster called a marriage and did not want to be divorced again. I was determined to make my train wreck of a relationship work. When I met Mira, all I wanted was a home and a woman to come home to more than anything. I guess I saw what I wanted to see until I had no choice. I don't want to argue, Jack. It's over between us. You know that, she said, as she dressed to leave our house on a recent Friday night. I need to be with my friends. You mean your boyfriend? I heard most of your conversation on the phone this morning. If he calls my house again, I will throw you and your phone out of the window. Don't get jealous. You know we can't stay together. I am not jealous. You said you wanted to pursue your own life 4 months ago. Why are you still here? You being here does not allow me to get on with my life. My patience with you is finished. I have been tested enough. Don't worry, I'll be gone soon. She looked stunning. Her full red lips, perfume, and sexy black dress left little to the imagination. She was going to meet another man and didn't care that I knew about it. I had always been gentle and kind to her, but that was about to change. His disrespect for me and my sons was intolerable. I knew that I still cared a little about her. I also knew that I had reached my limit. Mira and her boyfriend were going to find out that there would be a price to pay for their treachery and disrespect. My anger grew as I watched her. What has gotten into you? What did I do to deserve this treatment? Did you think I was going to tolerate this crap? Your social life has always been more important than your husband? I have put up with your shit for too long. You've been lying to me for a long time. I know what you've been doing. Tonight, I can't deny it anymore. You treat me and my sons like crap. You really bank on the promise I made to your father that I would protect you from harm. Somehow, my sense of honor and love for you has been turned against me. You have never helped pay a single bill. I supported you as you struggled to get your MBA and through a number of nothing jobs. Now that you've got yourself a big-time job in an investment bank, I'm not good enough for you. Is that it? I could feel my guts boiling. I hate being around your scumsucker sons. I hate it every time I see them. Every time you wrote a child support check, I wanted to puke. Now they are here, and I don't want to be their mother. Besides, you have no sophistication. You're just a simple man who wants a simple life. I need more than you can give, she said, with an indifference and coldness that could not be ignored. She really thought she was somehow superior to me. Bitch, my sons are not scumsuckers, and if you are wise, you will not call them that name again. You have 1 week from today to get your stuff out of my house. If you and your possessions are not gone at that time, I will put all of it in the garbage. After next Friday, you will not be allowed in my house. I will no longer be held captive by the promise that I made to your father. We are finished. I can't stand the sight of you. I was glad that my sons were with my sister for a couple of weeks. They didn't need to be exposed to her another second. I felt ashamed and embarrassed that I ever exposed them to the monster I was looking at. She looked shocked. She was beginning to realize that I had changed. I was not going to take care of her needs anymore. My stomach felt twisted. It felt like I had been gunshot. I hated myself for still feeling anything for her. I wanted to hurt her. At the same time, I grieved for the love that never was, except in my mind. Despite my complete hatred of what she was doing and who she really was, I felt a strange bond with her. It wasn't love. That had been dying slowly for a long time. I felt sorry for her, even though she only deserved my contempt. I truly believed she would end up the victim of her own karma. Her treachery deserved none of my sympathy. I've had enough of your disrespect. And when did you get to be the queen? I'd just like to know, why do you hate them and me so much? You think that you're superior to me, to us. In fact, you're a two-bit hooker who doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as myself or my sons, bitch. Their bitch of a mother dumped them on you, and you dumped them on me. You never have any money. You spend all of your time and income on them. I don't hate you. I don't know how I feel about you. Some part of me still cares about you. But I don't love you, Jack. I need the finer things in life. I deserve that. I never should have married a man with children. I need a man who can give me his full attention, she said, picking up her purse. The only reason I married you was to get a green card and live rent-free until I could arrange my life, and when I needed your dick or anything else, you always said yes. Sorry, dear, she said, mockingly. She had no idea that I was recording the conversation. You've got a lot of nerve calling somebody a 304. You are more of a 304 than my ex ever was. I can't remember you ever trying to be in their lives. You haven't been a wife and definitely not a mother. The days of obliging you are over. From now on, you can take care of yourself. You are as plastic as the fancy cars and restaurants that you love so much. You knew from the beginning my ex left me in a pile of debt. I pay the mortgage, buy the food and everything else. Did you never try to help me? Did you? I said, raising my voice. All you have done since I married you was spending my money. Why did you really marry me? I didn't really expect an answer. I don't have a lot of cash because I have paid your bills. You have never contributed 1 cent to this household. Have you ever been denied anything that you needed since we've been together? You have served your purpose. In a short while, I will have my green card. I have my education and now a great profession. I don't need you anymore. Sorry. I know that's cold. It's the way things are. I might miss your love making a little, but not much. He is bigger than you. She was smiling. What was that about? She was driving the nail deeper. It took all of my martial arts training not to lash out at her. I wanted to wring her neck and throw her in the street. I decided not to let her bait me. Did you ever love me? She looked at me with an evil grin, but didn't answer. I could tell she didn't want to set me off before she was ready to go. The look on her face was my answer. Then, I heard a car horn blow in front of my door. You are one sick piece of work. You're lucky I haven't thrown you in the street months ago, I said, feeling sad and exhausted. Don't wait up. I probably won't be back tonight, she said sarcastically. The doorbell rang. The son of a bitch had the nerve to come to my front door. I opened it. Is Mira here? He asked with a smirk on his face. So, you're the guy who can't control his bitch, he said, brushing past me, entering my house. Mira came downstairs and approached the door with a smug look on her face. She stood close to Max. I had found out his name was Max Brown. He was engaged to a rich, divorced woman who had 2 kids. I wondered if Mira knew that. My loving husband just threatened me. He told me I have 1 week to get out. What do you think about that, Max? She asked her date. I think I should kick his butt right now for upsetting you, he said, looking at me. I would like for you to try that, Max, preferably in front of witnesses. It would be a shame to make your fiancée a widow before she was married. It would be my pleasure to punish you in front of witnesses and teach you some respect, I said calmly, with the smile of predator stalking his kill. He had a confused look on his face. My confidence rattled his confidence. Myra's expression didn't change. She obviously already knew of Max's impending marriage. I figured they had a plan to relieve his fiancée her of her funds, another scam. Those two deserved each other. I decided to screw up their plans. Never mind him, Max. Let's go. He's had a little martial arts training and thinks he's a tough guy. Don't waste your strength on him. Besides, I want him to sit here and think about you screwing me. Another time, chicken. Another time, he said, puffing himself up. I started to tell her to stay gone. I realized I needed time to exact my revenge. A few more days were all I needed. I decided not to hurt him at that moment. He was not worth getting arrested for. Apparently, Mira didn't tell him that I am proficient in the Filipino martial art of Kali, the art of combat at close quarters. She chose to denigrate my skills. I wondered why. He was taller than me by about 4 and about 20 pounds heavier. I knew that made him feel overconfident. It was hard to resist the urge to cut him down like a tree. My day would come. He leaned toward me and whispered, "Did she tell you that I screwed her in your bed?" he said, daring me to respond. "Did the bitch make you take a number, or did you stand in line?" He moved toward me. Mira pulled him away. Lucky for him. Sooner or later, his butt was mine. I watched as his Lexus pulled away from the curb. I knew his name, address, telephone number, and place of employment. He was her supervisor at her bank. I had collected a ton of their smutty emails and had pictures of them in various compromising positions in public places. Mira liked the thrill of pretending to be his submissive hooker in public. There's no doubt in my mind, she was setting him up for the kill as she had done to me. I wondered what her father would say when he saw my pictures. I never wanted to hurt her. Her treatment of me and my sons was deliberately cruel. It was past time that I made sure she couldn't inflict any more pain on them or me. The twins were 4 years old. They could never understand why Mira didn't like them. I hated myself for exposing them to her poison as long as I did. They came to me full-time a couple of years ago when their mother dropped them off and disappeared. It was difficult to convince them. It was not their fault. Myra's refusal to spend time around them turned into a good thing. I was able to devote my time in being the best father I could. We were very close and they were the center of my life. My wife and her piece of crap boyfriend had to pay. It was not normal for me to be vindictive. I decided to allow myself to use retribution to assuage my pain. My lawyer would have the divorce papers in a few days. I knew she thought she could abuse me forever. I was glad that I had nothing worth stealing except my house, a modest mutual fund investment, and my eventual pension. I owned the house before I met her. I wanted the satisfaction of serving her before she could serve me. Strangely, I got the feeling she was in no big hurry for a divorce. Being married gave her the freedom to screw around without making any commitments. She was happy with the status quo, at least for now. Even though she would never admit it, she depended on my consistency and stability. She would leave with nothing but regrets. I knew she underestimated my resolve. My plan was in motion. The next step was a visit to the Department of Immigration and Naturalization. I had an appointment with a Ms. Saunders. When I found her cubicle, I was awestruck. She was beautiful. No, more than that, she was stunning. I was expecting an overweight, disgruntled bureaucrat. "Mr. Taylor," she said, smiling at me and extending her hand. "Please, have a seat. I understand you are here to report a case of immigration fraud. Is that right?" she said, smiling. I didn't answer at first. I was lost in her eyes. Her raven black hair and big brown eyes and radiant smile hypnotized me. My body ached from not being with a woman for a long time. If I had to order the perfect woman, it would have been her. I could feel my heart rate increase. She awakened feelings in me that I thought were dead. I struggled to focus. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you are much prettier than I expected. I hope I'm not being too forward," I said, sitting down. She blushed and looked down at her desk modestly. "Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I haven't heard such a nice compliment in a good while. Let's get down to the business at hand, Mr. Taylor. Why are you here?" she said in her most professional voice. I told her the whole story. My soon-to-be ex-wife married me for the purpose of getting a green card. She never loved me and planned on dumping me when her plan was completed. The entire marriage was a sham, a fraud, and I don't want her to get away with it. "Do you have any proof of what you were saying?" I took a tape recorder out of my pocket and several pictures and emails. I played the tape. My face showed the obvious pain it caused. I don't know if I could use it in court, but it should make my point. I also have pictures of her having sex with her boyfriend in the parking lot of a restaurant and other places. They were not very discreet. She looked at the pictures with a poker face. "I think we have enough to proceed, Mr. Taylor. We'll be in touch with you," she said, standing up. "We take a very dim view of immigration fraud, especially since 9/11. Thank you for alerting this office." She sounded very professional. "Now that we have the business out of the way, would you have dinner with me tonight?" I said with pleading eyes. I could sense her ambivalence. I could see her mind appraising the situation and me. "By the way, what is your first name?" "Denise. Denise Saunders. Glad to meet you. I'm Jack." "Well, what do you say, Denise? It is not good policy to take work out of the office. I promise not to mention anything about my ex. No business tonight. I have not had a woman's company for a long, long time, especially a lady as lovely as you are. Come on. It's just dinner. Even immigration officials have to eat." I promised to be a perfect gentleman. I waited for her response and hoped for the best. After a few moments of looking at my best smile, she said okay with reservations. "Great. What time would you like me to pick you up? If you could meet me in the front of the building at 5:30, we can have an early dinner. I'll call my sitter and tell her I'll be a little late. I can't believe I'm doing this. There is something about you that I trust. I don't know why. You won't be sorry. I promise," I said, trying to control my enthusiasm. I felt like a teenager going on his first date. I had time to go home, get cleaned up, and be back in plenty of time. I realized for the first time in months, I felt good. At dinner, we spoke of many things. She loosened up after a while, and I had the feeling that we had known each other a long time. We were both happy to be in the company of each other. She told about her divorce and her 7-year-old daughter, named Hannah. We talked about her love of cooking and hiking, and I talked of my sons and my love of martial arts and motorcycles. We discovered that we were very different, yet compatible. I found myself wanting to hug her. I kept imaging her body pressed against mine with fiery passion in her eyes. She picked up on my distraction. "What are you thinking? You have such a faraway look in your eyes," she said with affection, looking at me intently. "I was hoping that you were having as much fun as I am. When I look at you, I get a warm feeling. I see passion and strength in your eyes. From the first moment I saw you, I felt a connection. I feel it too. What is happening here? We just met. I don't even know you. Maybe we just better slow down." That sounds like good advice, very logical. But I'm just going with the flow. If I get too carried away, please just tell me. I don't want to offend you or have you think I'm some kind of nut. No, actually I'm flattered. I never thought of myself as being that attractive. For the record, I think that every woman I see from this day onward will come in second to you. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had known each other before. Maybe, in a different lifetime we had been lovers. I can't believe you. Look at my face. Do I look like I'm kidding? She didn't answer. The expression on her face said she understood. "How do you feel about what your wife?" "Soon-to-be ex-wife," I interjected. "Jack, how do you feel about her betrayal and manipulation?" Denise asked, changing the subject. I hesitated for a moment to collect my thoughts. My face betrayed the pain that I thought I was past. I feel sad, hurt, and angry. My ego has taken a serious beating. I never had a chance to make her happy. She wouldn't let me. I was set up from the beginning. I just can't understand her need to disrespect me. Maybe that hurts more than anything. Could be, there is nothing more to understand than what you see. She is what she is. You're a gentle, kind man. I know that in my heart. You don't deserve how she has treated you. Fortunately, Denise didn't see the other side of me. The part that I kept carefully controlled and reserved for when I needed it. What would you like to see happen to her? She married me to get a green card, among other things. I think the only fitting punishment would be to make sure she gets a one-way ticket back to Istanbul and nothing in the divorce," I said, clenching my fists. Denise reached across the table and took my hands in hers. I could feel her energy and her compassion. It calmed me down. We spoke more of what to do about Mira. "How did your ex-husband ever let you go?" "He didn't. I ran. He wanted me to be his punching bag forever. Unfortunately for him, I had other plans. When he struck Hannah, it was the last straw. I couldn't take it anymore. I left him and never looked back. That was 3 years ago. I'm glad he was such a fool. If he wasn't, we wouldn't be here and I would not be sitting here holding your hand." The thought of anyone hurting Denise enraged me. A small band started playing. They were pretty good. "Would you like to dance, lady? They're playing our song." "Really? What song is that?" "Whatever they're playing," I said, pulling her to me, beginning to sway to the music. The feeling of her pressed against me and the scent of her perfume had a strong effect on Mr. Happy. I felt her relax and melt into me. "Don't worry about Mira. I'll take care of everything tomorrow," she whispered in my ear as we danced. I realized that I saw more than passion and strength in her eyes. I saw her soul and my future. We kissed with gentle passion and held each other tightly when I took Denise home. I wanted her, and I knew she wanted me. We both knew without speaking. The next time we were together we would make love. I tore myself away from her. Trying to sleep that night, I kept seeing her face and hearing her laugh. I thought, could I be in love already? I wasn't sure. All I knew was that life goes on. Self-pity and regrets are a waste of time, and I had wasted enough time. I was happy. When I returned home, Mira was in the kitchen sitting at the table. "I'm glad you're here," I said, sitting across from her. "Friday is your last day. I will be home by 6 p.m. Please be here. I have something important to say to you before you go. Will you do that for me? Why don't you tell me now?" "No, I'm tired. I'm going to bed. I will be glad to get my bed back. I've been in that guest room for too long. I should have made you sleep in the guest room. I should have done a lot of things differently." I went into the den to watch some TV. 20 minutes later, Mira was standing in the doorway wearing the black lingerie I had bought her for our 2nd anniversary. She looked as sexy as ever. I was angry with myself when my body responded. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing she still had that power over me. "Jack, you can have me if you want to. It's been so long. Tomorrow, I'm walking out of your life forever. Tonight, you can take me any way you want to for old time's sake. I'm yours," she said in her most sultry voice. "I know you still care for me. I see it in your face. Could we forget all of our differences and problems for one night, please?" She cooed. I stood up and walked towards her, placing my hands gently on her face. She looked hopeful. I wouldn't screw you with the dog's meat, I said, pushing her face away from me. A pained and confused expression crossed her face. I would remember that look forever. Her last attempt to manipulate and use me had failed. I didn't hate her. What I felt was worse. I felt nothing, numb, empty. I just knew that I needed to get away from her. To feel anything but revulsion would be to invite more heartache. I slept restlessly that night. When the sun rose, my plan for retribution would begin. At 9 a.m., I was in my lawyer's office. Okay, Jack. I'll have your divorce documents today by 3 o'clock. What else? I want to sue Max Brown for alienation of affection or intentional infliction of emotional distress, or anything else you can think of. I want him to pay. He didn't actually cause my marriage to fall apart, but I want him to pay anyway. I also want to sue the bank for not enforcing its morals clause in Max Brown's contract. They knew he was screwing my wife and allowed it to happen. I want to serve these papers personally today at 4 p.m. Can we do this? I hope you're not planning on doing something stupid, said my lawyer. This situation might get really ugly. It is legal for you to serve the papers as long as there is a witness. I hope it does get ugly. I really do. It's better if you don't know what I'm planning, I said with a look of steel determination. I arrived at Max Brown's office at 4 o'clock. A clerk showed me where he was. I saw him leaning over a secretary, placing his face too close to hers. She was trying to put some space between him and her. He looked up in time to see me coming. As I walked towards him, I slipped into the relaxed focus that I call combat mode. Max was about to experience some serious pain. He looked worried, then defiant. What are you doing here, Taylor? He was not going to wait long to get his answer. I have some gifts for you, I said, handing him a copy of my divorce papers, naming him as the correspondent in adultery. He looked annoyed. Everyone in the office was watching. I handed him another document. This document is a lawsuit charging you with alienation of affection, causing the breakdown of my marriage. And this is a copy of my lawsuit against your bank for allowing this blatant affair to continue in full view and knowledge of your supervisors in violation of the bank's morals clause of your contract. I gave him some of the explicit pictures I had of him and Mira. Your boss really liked those pictures, I said with a smile. Is that it? He was really angry now. I could see the blood rushing to his head. He could barely contain himself. One more thing, I said, walking away from him and stopping. Your fiancée should be receiving these papers and pictures right about now by messenger service. I guess she is not too happy with you at the moment. I think she might want her car back. Who is getting screwed now, a-hole? When he started to rush towards me yelling, I'll kill you, I knew I had him where I wanted him. I smiled as he ran towards me with clenched fist. My day of retribution was at hand. The next several seconds seemed to move slowly. I waited for his attack and easily sidestepped his charge, sending 2 rapid punches to his liver, followed by a flurry of blows to his torso. Then, I drove my knee into his groin hard enough to lift him off the floor. This was followed by a slap to his ear which ruptured his eardrum. A sweeping backward movement of my leg took his legs away as a simultaneous palm strike broke his nose. He hit the floor with a thud. He wasn't dead, but I had seriously upset his day. Lucky for him, the blow to his nose was intended to break it, not drive the cartilage into his brain. I had considered that option. As the fog of battle lifted, I heard clapping. It seemed to grow louder and louder. The secretary that Max had been harassing was applauding. This was followed by more clapping. I seemed every woman in the office joined in and was happy that Max got his butt kicked. Obviously, no one was shedding any tears for him. I stood there surprised by their support. Call the police and tell them to bring an ambulance, I said to the nearest secretary. I think Max over here has a bad headache. She handed me a slip of paper with her phone number on it. She whispered, call me. The police questioned me at length. They couldn't understand how so much damage could be done to Max in less than 10 seconds. There were 15 witnesses that said I had acted in self-defense after Max attacked me, threatening to kill me. Reluctantly, they told me to go home and that they would have some questions for me later. I felt good on the drive home. One of my tormentors had been dealt with. Now, there was one to go. When I arrived home, I called Denise and asked her to meet me at home when she got off from work. Mira showed up exactly at 6 p.m. She was irate. Jack, what the hell have you done? That scene you pulled in my office was humiliating. Everyone in the office is talking about it. I'll lose my job. You almost killed Max. I never knew you could be so heartless and cruel. Cruel? You're calling me cruel? You screwed that dipshit in my bed and you're calling me cruel? You have one hell of a lot of nerve. He's damned lucky to still be breathing, I said, trying to control myself. Who is this bimbo? she inquired, finally recognizing Denise's presence. This is no bimbo as you put it. Denise is my very good friend, I said, putting my arm around Denise's waist and kissing her on her cheek. Denise works for the Department of Immigration and Naturalization. The look on Myra's face was priceless, and she began to understand something was up. Why is she here? I wanted her here to wish you a safe trip. Trip? I'm not going anywhere. Oh yes you are, I said, opening the front door. 3 men waited outside, 2 G-man types and a short balding fellow. They came inside and immediately the short guy asked, Myra Taylor? Yes. You've been served. These papers are suing you for divorce for adultery. He turned and left. That left to 2 men. Her jaw dropped. She looked at me, then at them. She looked like she had just been sentenced to death. They showed their ID and badges and said, we have credible information that your immigration status in this country was obtained fraudulently. Please come with us. We have a few questions we'd like to ask you. As she was being escorted out, she paused at the doorway and turned back to face me. Her green eyes searched mine, desperate, pleading. Jack, you promised you'd never let anything happen to me, she said, her voice a mix of defiance and desperation. I stood there for a moment, unmoved, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. Then, without a flicker of emotion, I replied, I lied. I closed the door firmly behind her, sealing off not just the moment but the entire chapter of my life. Forever. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Just as I stepped into the room, I saw Eric, but what happened in the next few seconds took my breath away. His eyes were burning with rage as he stormed toward me. Before I could even process what was happening, he grabbed me by my hair and started dragging me across the floor. My heart raced, each moment felt like the ground was slipping from beneath me. Then, with a violent shove, he pushed me out of the hotel door, and everything went dark. My name is Kara, and my first job after college was as an assistant at Andrews and Howard law firm in Denver. It was always busy, with phones ringing non-stop, and I loved the fast pace. It kept me alert while I was still learning my way around. That's when I met Eric. He worked in the purchasing department, which was close to the legal offices. One day, I saw him arguing on the phone about a delayed shipment. After hanging up, he caught me watching and said, "Suppliers," rolling his eyes. "Tough day?" I asked with a smile. "Every day is a battlefield here," he replied. "You're new?" "Yeah, I just started this week." "I'm Kara." "Eric. Welcome to the madness. Don't let the chaos scare you off." We started having lunch together because it was easier to navigate the large cafeteria with someone who knew the place. Eric was easy to talk to, had a sharp wit, and was honest about his opinions. One lunch turned into many, and soon we were having drinks after work. Our conversations moved from work stuff to more personal topics. I learned that he was an only child, adored by his mother, but nagged for not living up to his potential. "You haven't met my mom yet, but brace yourself when you do," Eric warned one evening. "She has this idea of the perfect woman, and trust me, no one's good enough." Our friendship soon turned romantic. After a year of dating, Eric proposed. The wedding was simple but perfect for us, and we bought an apartment together with my grandmother's savings. Life with Eric was mostly smooth, with occasional arguments about small things like who forgot to buy milk or whose turn it was to clean, nothing too serious, just normal couple stuff. Then, one day, everything changed. I was always tired, and even the smell of coffee, which I loved, made me nauseous. One morning, struggling to get out of bed, I decided enough was enough. I booked an appointment with my doctor, thinking I might have the flu. While I sat in the waiting room, flipping through a magazine without really reading it, my name was finally called. Dr. Bailey, always straightforward, asked me a few questions, ran some tests, and then gave me the news. "Well, Kara, congratulations are in order, you're pregnant." "Pregnant?" I repeated, feeling shocked. "Are you sure?" "Quite sure," Dr. Bailey smiled, handing me the test results. "But you need to be careful. Your body is showing some warning signs. Nothing too scary, but you need rest and less stress. I nodded, my mind racing. Pregnant. How would Eric react? I couldn't tell him over the phone, this needed to be face to face. When I got home that evening, I found Eric on the couch, eyes on his phone. Eric, we need to talk, I said, my voice shaky. I went to the doctor today, we're going to have a baby. Eric's face changed, it wasn't the reaction I had hoped for. A baby, Kara. It's not great timing. We haven't even traveled like we talked about, and a baby is a huge change. I felt a pain in my heart. I know it's unexpected, but it's also kind of amazing, right? We're going to be parents. Eric ran his hands through his hair, a sign he was stressed. I don't know, Kara, it's too much, too soon. Too soon for a family with me? I asked, feeling hurt. No, that's not what I mean. I just thought we had more time, just us two. The conversation went in circles, Eric saying it was bad timing and me trying to highlight the positive. By the end, Eric had shut down, and I was left feeling alone with news that should have brought us together but was pushing us apart. The next day, I spoke to my boss, Mr. Howard. I needed some accommodations because of the doctor's orders. Mr. Howard, I need to ask for a change, I began. I'm pregnant, and there are some complications. Could I possibly work from home? Mr. Howard, who was always more understanding than I gave him credit for, didn't hesitate. Of course, Kara. We'll set up everything you need at home. Take care of yourself and the little one. Going home that day, I hoped Eric had softened a bit. But when I told him about the remote work arrangement, his reaction was cold. So you're just going to be home now? What about all the plans we had? I thought you'd be happy I found a way to keep the stress down, I said, trying to stay calm. Kara, you're not listening. I said it's too soon for all this, Eric snapped back. I went to bed early that night, feeling the distance between us grow. As I lay there, the reality of my situation sank in, this journey was going to be tougher than I thought. The air in our apartment felt heavier every day, like a cloud hung over us even if the sun was shining outside. Eric's affection seemed to fade quickly. He became more distant and irritated by the small changes in my life because of the pregnancy. He said he felt neglected, like he was second to my health and the baby's needs. His mother, Mrs. Blake, was no help either. She called one afternoon, her voice as cold as winter. Kara, this child is not the right time. You should be focusing on supporting Eric, not dragging him into fatherhood, she said. I clenched the phone tighter, fighting back tears. It's not like I planned this by myself, Mrs. Blake. It's our child, not just mine. There are options, you know. You're choosing the most selfish one, she said, her words cutting deep. As if that wasn't enough, Eric's behavior changed even more. His cologne was masked by another scent, a woman's perfume, unfamiliar and sweet, clinging to his clothes. The first time I smelled it, I convinced myself it was a mix-up at the dry cleaner. But then it happened again. And again. He also started staying out late, mumbling about needing to catch up on work, and his weekends were suddenly filled with business trips. It was too much to be a coincidence. I held my tongue, not wanting to believe the worst, but doubt had been planted. That Saturday, when Eric mentioned another business trip, I reached out to Michael, an old classmate who now worked as a detective. We met at a small cafe where we could talk privately. Michael slid a folder across the table to me. I got what you asked for, Kara. Are you sure you want to see this? I nodded, unable to speak, and opened the folder. The photos were clear and unmistakable. There was Eric, and with him, another woman. I recognized her from his office, a new hire he had mentioned in passing. Kara, I'm sorry, Michael said, his voice low. There's video too. It's consistent. My heart sank to my feet. Thanks, Michael. I needed to know. I went home feeling numb, carrying the folder as if it were made of lead. As I turned the key in the lock, the door swung open. Mrs. Blake stood there, her face twisted in disapproval. I came to see how you are. Eric said he's worried about you. I know about Eric. He's not on a business trip, he's with someone else, I said. She scoffed, her defense quick and sharp. You're driving him away, always sick, complaining, needing things. What man wants that? That's no excuse for cheating, I shot back, anger rising. And do you think having his baby will fix things? No one in the family wants this child, Kara, only you, she said, her words like a physical blow. Get out, I said, my voice trembling. She threw her hands up and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The silence afterward was deafening. I sat on the couch feeling numb and hollow. 30 minutes felt like an eternity, each second passing with heavy pain echoing the throbbing in my heart. My mind was racing, but a dreadful resolve settled over me. I had to face Eric and see the truth with my own eyes. Michael had given me all the details I needed, the Riverstone Hotel, room 546. His voice had been filled with reluctant professionalism. My hands shook slightly as I parked the car and walked into the hotel lobby, my stomach in knots. I took the elevator, my heart pounding in my ears with each floor it passed. When the doors opened, I stepped out into a brightly lit hallway that felt too cheery for what I was about to do. Room 546 was just down the hall. As I approached, I could hear laughter and the clinking of glasses. My hand trembled as I knocked on the door. Room service must be here with the champagne, I heard a woman's voice, chirpy and carefree. After a few seconds that felt like hours, the door swung open. Eric looked out, his expression changing from anticipation to shock in an instant. Kara, what? How did you find me? I know everything, Eric, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Without waiting for an invitation, I pushed past him into the room. The sight that greeted me was like a slap. There she was, his mistress, half-dressed and scrambling to cover up as if modesty meant anything now. Eric recovered from his initial shock, and his face hardened. Why are you here, Kara? To spy on me? To beg? No, Eric. I'm here to see the truth, I replied, my voice steadied despite the turmoil inside. I came for the truth, not that you'd know anything about that, I said, feeling a bitter laugh rise in my throat. He scoffed, stepping closer. You want the truth? Here it is, I'm not happy with you anymore. You're always so wrapped up in yourself and this baby. His mistress, now somewhat dressed, smirked and added, maybe if you paid more attention to him, he wouldn't be with me. Her words stung, but it was Eric's agreement, the nod he gave her, that twisted the knife deeper. Yeah, you should be thanking us. We're just waiting for your baby to be born, then I can finally move on properly. The room spun around me, and a sharp pain stabbed through my abdomen. I doubled over, gasping, the shock and pain mingling into a nauseating swirl. Eric, I think something's wrong, I managed to say, my voice a whisper of desperation. Please, call an ambulance. He and his mistress exchanged a quick, dismissive glance. Then he turned back to me. You're probably just overreacting, like always, Eric said coldly. They dressed quickly, stepping over me as if I were just another obstacle in their path. The last thing I saw before darkness claimed me was the closing door, its click echoing ominously in the cold, empty room. I woke to the gentle yet urgent voice of a maid trying to rouse me. Ma'am, can you hear me? Her face swam into view as I blinked away the darkness clouding my vision. The pain was still there, a dull ache that seemed to echo through my entire body. Where am I? My voice sounded hoarse, foreign even to my own ears. You're still in the hotel room, dear. I found you on the floor. I'm calling an ambulance now, she said. True to her word, the next thing I knew, I was being wheeled through the emergency room. The hospital lights were harsh and blinding as nurses and doctors swarmed around me, their voices a cacophony of concern that I could barely comprehend. They asked questions, too many questions, but all I could think about was the betrayal and the pain. Eric never showed up at the hospital, nor did his mother. Calls went unanswered, their silence more painful than any physical wound. By the time the doctor came with the news that I had lost the baby, the grief was so heavy, so overwhelming, it was all-consuming. I could barely stop myself from screaming. The loss was not just a personal tragedy, it felt like an injustice, one that Eric, his mistress, and his mother had all played a part in. They had abandoned me, leaving me alone at my most vulnerable. Bitterness and anger brewed inside me like a storm. After what felt like an eternity, the hospital discharged me. I drove straight to our apartment and began packing Eric's things. Each shirt I folded, each sock I threw into the box, felt like cutting ties. With his belongings piled in the trunk of my car, I drove to Mrs. Blake's house. I didn't bother with niceties. I unloaded his things right in the driveway, letting them fall wherever they may. I didn't knock, I just walked in. Mrs. Blake was sitting in the living room, a look of resignation on her face. She knew why I was there. Kara, she started, her tone weary. You should just leave. Take what dignity you have left. Dignity? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think I came here for a lecture on dignity from you? I back my son. He'll be better off without you, she said bluntly. He has excellent lawyers, you'll only embarrass yourself. At that, something snapped inside me. Do you even care that your grandchild is gone? That your son left me alone in a hotel room to lose his child? Her eyes flickered away, unable to meet mine. It's a tough situation. It's done, Kara. I stepped closer, my voice low and steady. How do you feel as a mother, knowing what happened? Knowing your grandchild was lost? She didn't answer, just looked away, a crack in her composed facade. I will see your son in court, I said, the words heavy with promise. You can tell him that. Turning on my heel, I left her sitting there, alone with the weight of her choices. As I walked back to my car, the cool air felt sharp against my skin, but my path had never been clearer. I would fight, not just for me, but for the life that was lost and for the truth that needed to see the light of day. Stepping into the courthouse, I felt every eye on me, or maybe it was just the weight of what was about to happen pressing down. My best friend from college, Jessica, was right beside me. She had become a force in the courtroom, known for tearing apart even the slickest defense. When I told Jessica everything, she didn't hesitate. I've got this, Kara. And don't worry about the fees, this one's on me, she said, her voice fierce and reassuring. We sat at our table, papers neatly arranged, evidence ready. Across from us, Eric and his mistress looked confident, a smugness that irked me. As the proceedings began, their lawyer painted a picture of me as unstable, broken by grief, and fabricating stories. The plaintiff has suffered immense emotional distress, yes, which has led to these wild accusations. There is no substantial evidence of any affair or wrongdoing on my client's part, he argued. When it was our turn, Jessica stood, her presence commanding the room. Your Honor, not only do we have substantial evidence, but we also have testimony that will corroborate everything my client has claimed. She presented the photos first, a clear and undeniable proof of the affair, passing them around for the judge and eventually to the opposing counsel, who looked visibly shaken as they viewed them. Next, Jessica played the video from the hotel. The room fell silent as the scene played out, me entering the hotel, then Eric and his mistress laughing and hugging, leaving the hotel without a hint of concern. But that's not all, Jessica continued. She called the maid who found me to the stand. Her testimony was simple but powerful. I found her on the floor, unconscious. They were gone. She could have died, the maid said, her voice steady. Eric's face went white, and his mistress couldn't sit still, her leg bouncing nervously. When they were given a chance to respond, Eric stood up, his voice shaky. This isn't how it looks. We were just scared and confused. Scared? So you leave your pregnant wife unconscious on the floor? Jessica shot back, her tone icy. The judge took everything into consideration, the weight of the evidence, the testimonies. After what felt like a lifetime, he spoke. I find in favor of the plaintiff, Kara Ellis. The evidence of infidelity and negligence is overwhelming. I'm granting a 60/40 division of all marital assets, as well as financial compensation for the emotional distress caused by the actions of the defendants. As we walked out of the courtroom, Jessica elbowed me gently, a victorious glint in her eye. How's that for justice? I managed a small smile, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. Thanks, Jessica. I couldn't have done this without you. Life began to limp back to normal after the courtroom drama. The weight of the trial had lifted, but the scars remained. Every day was a step forward, a move toward healing. With Jessica's support and my own determination, I started the difficult journey ahead. I bought a small apartment, and each new piece of furniture, every picture I hung on the walls, was a step away from my past torment. The only shadow over my fresh start was seeing Eric and his mistress at work, a constant reminder of the betrayal. One afternoon, as I was sorting through some legal briefs, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in a while. It was Eric's mother, Mrs. Blake. Kara, could we meet? I need to talk to you, her voice trembled over the phone. I hesitated, memories of our last encounter flashing through my mind. Why should I meet you, Mrs. Blake? It's about Eric, and the company. Please, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Curiosity piqued, and with a bit of old loyalty to the company that had stood by me, I agreed. We met at a small cafe, away from prying eyes. She looked worn, her eyes rimmed with red as if she had been crying. Eric, he's not the boy I raised anymore, she started, not meeting my eyes. He and that woman, they're planning to cheat the company, sell off assets, and force me out of my home. Her words hung heavy between us. I was still processing when she grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Please. You're the only one I could trust to stop this. The plea in her eyes was real, but so was my reluctance. Mrs. Blake, your family drama is not my business anymore. It's not just family, Kara. It's your company too. They're planning something big, it could ruin everything, her urgency struck a chord. I was, after all, part of that company. It had given me a chance when I was just a college grad, and many of my colleagues were like family. All right, I'll look into it, I conceded, more for the company than for her. Back at work, I quietly pulled records and contracts, tracing the trail of transactions Eric and his mistress were involved in. It didn't take long to spot the irregularities. The numbers didn't add up, goods were being purchased at inflated prices, far above market value. Armed with evidence, I made my way to the director's office, laying the documents on his desk. I watched his eyes narrow as he scanned the evidence. This is serious, Mr. Howard stated flatly, looking up at me. I'll handle this from here. Thank you, Kara. You may have just saved this company from a significant loss. Leaving his office, I felt a mix of relief and anticipation. Walking past Eric and his mistress, I caught snippets of their mocking laughter, but I knew I had done the right thing. My fresh start was not just about moving on from the past, but also standing up for what was right. As the days passed, the company took swift action. Eric and his mistress were investigated, and the fraudulent activities were halted. The company was saved from a major financial blow, and I felt a sense of justice. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about protecting the place and people who had supported me. In my new apartment, I continued to build my life. Each day brought a little more peace, and with each step forward, I felt stronger. The betrayal and loss were still there, but they no longer defined me. I was moving on, creating a new chapter in my life, and for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about the future. I couldn't help but smile to myself. Justice had a way of finding its path, no matter how twisted the road might be. After exposing Eric and his mistress, a full-scale investigation rippled through the company. As it unfolded, I was often called to testify, detailing every discrepancy and irregular transaction I had uncovered. The courtroom once again became a familiar setting, but this time I stood confidently, bolstered by the truth and the mountains of evidence that supported our claims. The legal battles were intense. Eric and his mistress faced the consequences head-on. The company, having suffered significant potential losses, pursued justice just as relentlessly, culminating in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against them. The verdict was as expected, guilty. The court's decision barred them from holding any senior positions in the future, a fitting end to their corporate misdeeds. Amidst the chaos, my own career took a surprising but welcome turn. The company recognized my efforts and promoted me to a senior legal position, an acknowledgement that came with a significant reward. One quiet afternoon, as I was organizing files in my new office, a spacious room with a view of the city's skyline, my phone rang. The screen displayed a number I hadn't seen in a long while. It was Mrs. Blake. "Kara, it's me," her voice came through, tinged with humility, a stark contrast to our last encounters. "I wanted to thank you for saving my home from being sold out from under me." Her gratitude was genuine, and despite everything, I felt a twinge of sympathy for her. "You're welcome. I did what I felt was right," I replied. There was a pause, a breath of silence before she added, "I was wrong about you, Kara, so very wrong. I used to think you didn't deserve my son, but I've come to realize it was he who didn't deserve you." Her words, unexpected and raw, took me by surprise. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you might know. Could we meet? I'd like to apologize properly, face to face," she suggested, a hint of hope in her tone. I considered her request. "All right, Mrs. Blake, let's meet." We decided on a quiet cafe, neutral ground for what was to be a frank conversation. Sitting across from her, I saw the changes the months had wrought on her. Gone was the haughty demeanor, replaced by a somber reflectiveness. "Kara, I'm sorry for everything. I was blinded by my own expectations, my own desires for Eric," she began, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded, allowing her to continue. "I know it wasn't easy for you, and I made it harder. I see now that you did what was right, not just for you, but for everyone involved." Her honesty was disarming. "Thank you for your apology. It's taken a lot to get here, but I appreciate it." We talked for a while, sharing thoughts and feelings that had been bottled up for too long. By the end of our conversation, there was a sense of closure. While the past couldn't be changed, there was a mutual understanding and respect that hadn't been there before. As I left the cafe, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Life had thrown many challenges my way, but I had faced them head-on and emerged stronger. The future, once clouded with uncertainty, now seemed bright and full of possibilities.